lifestyle advice today. And it happens to be, of course, September the 26th, and it's a beautiful where I am today. I want to remind you today that exercise, first of all, is not expensive. Many people tell me, listen, out it's expensive. Well, actually, in most areas of that, it's really not that expensive when you think about one thing that is, and that is medical bills. When you and we exercise, we are lessening the opportunity, for example, of going into the hospital. As you get older, the more you exercise, the better your balance is, the better your health is, and of course, the better that you feel as well. You let your body speak. And of course, it enables you to do things that you're not able to do unless, of course, you exercise. So remember, exercise is not expensive, but medical bills are. How about sunlight? Sunlight is not expensive, but depression is. There's a lot of people out there that suffer from SAD. That means that, during the winter months when there is diminished sunlight, they, of course, suffer and they find it difficult and they find winter very hard. That's why I encourage people to get these ultraviolet lights to be able, of course, to deal with it. But as soon as it is warm out, get outside and get some vitamin D. That is very, very important. Now, I'm not recommending that you get too much sunlight, but we all need sunlight. I live in an area where, of course, it gets cold, but I have discovered something about the sun in the middle of the winter. In Canada, we get these bright, sunny days in the middle of winter. It can be really, really cold out. But as soon as that sunlight hits, you feel energized and you feel like, yeah, let's enjoy the day, even when it's cold out. Also, as well, healthy food is not expensive. You say to yourself, well, I can't afford to eat this or eat that. The truth of the matter is, obesity is really expensive. So it's important that you and I exercise, but also as well eat healthy food. Now, it's interesting that in where I live, of course, we don't have the fast food restaurants that so many other places have. So my wife and we end up eating at home most of the time. But it was interesting that yesterday I was reading about the restaurant industry in Canada right now. And that is that right now, get this, it says that now 3 out of 4 families are now eating more and more at home, which I think is absolutely fantastic. When my family was younger, we always made it a habit to have at least one meal a day as a family. And an interesting thing about when you have meals together, it's actually a time of friendship, of building relationships, but also as well building up your health. I also discovered in this particular survey that was done among the restaurant industry, when they actually talked to young people between the ages of 18 to 34, that 82% of them actually end up eating at home simply because nowadays it is too expensive. Do you remember when McDonald's had that $5 special and you'd get a fries, you get a drink, and of course you get a burger or something like that? Then, of course, recently, you go to McDonald's and a meal usually costs you around $13 or $14. Now they've come back and said, we're going to give you the $9.99 meal. Well, of course, we know how nutritional a McDonald's meal. Did you know that a McDonald's Big Mac is about 1,375 calories? That's right. A Big Mac, just the Big Mac, not the fries, not the drink. And I thought it was kind of interesting that there was a comedian that was out there and said simply this about, Canadians in particular. He says, We are the only country in the world where we'll get a Big Mac, fries, and a Diet Coke. I thought that was something. But listen, healthy food you may think is too expensive, but it really isn't. And but obesity is. And unfortunately, in my country, 52% of Canadians are considered obese. So I want to tell you something. Eating healthy food is not expensive when you look at the health concerns in the long term. Also, as well, saving money is not expensive. And then, unfortunately, a lot of people today have got into the cycle of debt. They have, in my country of Canada, the average Canadian is $1.87 in $1.87 in debt for every dollar that they earn. That means that they are servicing a debt of every dollar that they make, they are spending 87 cents more. And it is getting worse. It used to be about 10 years ago about $1.67, but now it's up to $1.87. When I was first starting out, there was a man whose name was Al Shipkanik. And Al said to me, you know what you need to do? You need to practice the 80-10-10 rule. I said, what is the 80-10-10 rule? He says, simple, 10% for saving, 10% for God, and 80%, of course, for, your regular bills. Warren Buffett says you need to practice the 70-30 if you can. And that was, of course, 70% for your bills, 10% for giving, 10% for saving, and 10% for, of course, the future, whatever that may be, or retirement. And then 70 if you can. Either way, saving money is not expensive. I've also discovered that in many relationships, you will have a saver and you'll have a spender. And it's the saver who actually helps the relationship and the money situation because they're saving while the partner is, of course, spending. But let me tell you something. Saving money is not expensive. Consumer debt is, especially these days where a credit card is anywhere from, let's say, 10% to 30%. You go to Walmart and you see that person standing and say, get yourself a Walmart card, get yourself a Canadian Tire card, get yourself a Home Depot card, not recognizing that that card is going to cost you 30% if you don't pay it off right away. I discovered that myself just recently. I went and got one of these Walmart cards, right? And what happened was you forget about things like that. And so I went to, help my daughter buy a home. And all of a sudden, the lady says, did you have a Walmart debt in the last year? I said, yeah, I paid it off about a year ago. It came up on my credit score. That's right. A credit score. Walmart, it was only 96 bucks, but I had neglected it. I forgot about it. And then all of a sudden I got this notice from Walmart saying, you owe us money. So I paid it off, not recognizing that it would affect my credit score. And I said, well, it was 96 bucks. She says, we'll overlook that. She says, I have to, however, tell you it was on your credit score. So you see, when you have these cards and they build up over time and they become a real problem, and you may forget about them. You may, and you say, well, I pay the minimum. Well, you want to tell you something. If you have a 30% credit card and you pay the minimum on it, it builds up. And before you know it, you're looking at hundreds of dollars of interest that was on a penny ante debt. So make sure that when it comes to credit cards or to credit, that you are very, very smart about the situation. Saving money is not expensive, but consumer debt is. Also, knowledge is not expensive, but you know what? Ignorance is. I always encourage people to read a lot. Did you know that a person who actually reads a lot is an individual who understands a lot? And we need that today because the simple fact is there's so much fake news out there. We need to walk with understanding and also with, of course, discernment. Now, we live in a world where there's lots of information and lots of knowledge, but there's not an awful lot of discernment or understanding or even wisdom. You know what wisdom is? Wisdom is the ability to be able to know what to do with the knowledge and also as well the information that is coming on. Just before I did this broadcast, I was listening to an analysis of the President of the United States and his latest news conference. It was interesting that this particular individual seems to get his information and his knowledge quite wrong quite often. And when he's fact checked, they discover very quickly that the guy really doesn't know what he's talking about. Well, I simply remind you today that you and we have access to a lot of knowledge. We have access to a lot of information, and we have a lot of access to, of course, news as well. So it's really wise to be discerning and understanding, especially the times in which we live, and walk with that. Don't just parrot whatever you hear on the news, but actually research it out for yourself. Knowledge is not expensive, but ignorance is. And these days, it seems that whatever a political stance is, many people will make that stance without really researching things out, without really having a lot of knowledge. My dad, for example, was a man that grew up during, the 30s and also in World War II. And I remember many, many times there would be these war movies that would come on. And my dad would shout at the TV set, "Those Americans, they think that they won the war," when, of course, they entered the war in 1941. Now, let's get something straight. The Americans did help contribute to winning World War II, but they didn't win it by themselves. My dad, for example, flew about 500 missions over the Central Europe, fighting the Nazis in a in a Lancaster bomber. He was a navigator. His job was to get the plane to where it needed to be and get the plane back. My dad flew both night and day. He flew in the worst conditions where they were being, shot at what they call flak. And my dad often said when he was, at the different events and different things that happened during World War II, he said, I had a first-hand view. He says, my knowledge gave me a real experience on what was going on. He said, yes, the Americans helped contribute, but they didn't win the war by themselves. And so, knowledge, of course, is not expensive. Ignorance is. And gratitude. This is a real important thing. Gratitude is not expensive. Envy is. You and we need to be thankful for the things that have come in our lives. Yes, bad people come into our lives, but you know what they do? They give us lessons. Good people, of course, who come into our lives are people that have really contributed to the positivity and also as well the thankfulness that we have. People that we meet are people that we can learn from. Yes, you can even learn from a child, but gratitude and having an attitude of gratitude is not expensive. Envy is. When you envy somebody else, you know what? It's going to make you do things and act certain ways that normally you wouldn't do. So be thankful, even for the little things that come in your life. It was Jeremiah who said in Lamentations 3:23, he said this, the mercies of God are new every morning. Great is his faithfulness. These are things that you and I should exhibit in our lives every day. You know, it says basically this: love is patient, love is kind. That's First Corinthians chapter 13, verse number 4. You and I should be grateful, not just at Thanksgiving, but also as well every single day. We should be thankful for the things that are in our lives that are positive. And even the bad things that happen to our lives, of course, make us grow. These are things that make us more creative, more resourceful, more, uh, they give us experience that we would not normally have. I've had some very interesting experiences. Let me tell you what happened to me. On the second day that I was driving school bus, I was coming around a corner, and then all of a sudden the school bus lights went woo, woo. And so I had to pull over and contact all the different moms and dads and everything like that. And my school bus ended. Now, there was a lot of lessons that I learned out of that particular situation. Number one is that when a school bus throws a timing belt, everything goes wild. Secondly, I learned all the names of my children and also as well the moms and dads. But the biggest lesson that I learned was, of course, that you need today anyway, you need what they call a group chat. So what I did out of that was, of course, I created a group chat out of all the different families that were on my contact list. So if something does go wrong, and it does happen from time to time, I can send out one chat instead of, texting every family. And so it was a great lesson to learn. Secondly, it was only the second time in my entire years of driving school bus that actually something like this actually happened. And it had never happened when children were actually on the bus. So it was a real learning experience. And, there were some very valuable lessons that I learned out of it. It was a bad thing, but it turned out to be a good thing because of the lessons that we learned. So when bad things happen, you can either be bitter or better. You can either become more resourceful, more knowledgeable, more creative, more, experienced in these things. That just totally depends on what happens. That was Irving Berlin who said this. He said simply this: gratitude is an attitude that every one of us should have, even in the difficult times of life. Difficulty can actually be a stepping stone to a better life. It just depends on your mindset, and it just depends on your attitude towards it. We had an old friend whose name was Tyson Spence, and Tyson said this: attitude is the only thing. So remember that today. You make your decision. You make your decision, for example, to go out and exercise today. You make that decision that today you're going to go and spend some time in the sunshine. Remember dear old John Denver: sunshine on my shoulder makes me happy. So catch some vitamin D today. Also as well, eat healthy. It will be the best thing that you can do in the long run. I know that processed food is cheaper, but eating healthy is the best option. Also as well, saving money. Today, make a decision that the money that you have, some of it is going to go into a savings account. It was Dave Ramsey who tells everyone, he says, listen, debt is a prison, and it is a prison. It will hold you into, of course, difficulty, and many people are suffering with, of course, that problem today. Also as well, make sure that you have knowledge. Make sure that you have understanding and discernment today. Be able to navigate, of course, the world in which we live. See things from a wise perspective. not from a political perspective, because I want to tell you right now, both Canada and the United States are more divided right now than they have ever been. You know why? Because there are leaders right now that are exploiting that. So you need to make sure that you are wise and discerning today and recognize that. Also, as well, remember gratitude is not expensive, envy is. Be thankful for even the smallest blessings in your life today. And remember, the steps of a good person are ordered by the Lord. Let him order your steps today. These are simple thoughts that I have for you today. My name is Robert Dean Steele. Thank you for joining me for today. Have yourself a great and godly day.